Hey, it's Chris, Liege Games. Let's do this. How was your week? It's crazy over here. Doing this in the midst of power outages. Thankfully these lights are, battery operated and we have a generator, but good gosh, going without power for 3 or 4 days in the midst of this summer heat wave is ridiculous. Hopefully none of you got affected by anything. Let's talk about Kickstarters though. That's why you're here, game founders. Let's see what's on the horizon. Let's see what's going to be upcoming next week and how many various ways you're going to have to not spend your money potentially. Let's do this. So, first up, on the day that this video is actually going is Cosmic Voyage on August 14th. This is a cooperative spacefaring game for 1 to 4 players where you are trying to bring your stranded spaceship home while avoiding obstacles like black holes, wormholes, meteor showers, everything sort of across the board. Now, there's going to be some dice rolling, there's going to be some iconography, and there's going to be some sort of allocation of said dice and resources in that sense. There is a rule book actually on Board Game Geek, and it actually gives a relatively good synopsis of what this game is actually going to look like in terms of the cooperative side of things. And they say it easily scales to less than 4 players as well if your ideal player count is, say, 1 or 2. Average game length 45 to 60 minutes, and you can see that it divides up into 2 types of rounds, a discovery phase and an exploration phase, where you are going to be taking cards from this discovery zone, as they call it, depending on what is out there, a 3x3 grid that you are drawing from that is replenished each round, unless there are obstacles like a black hole that are in your way. And then, during said exploration phase, you're undertaking those tasks that you chose in the previous phase via the discovery cards. And you can opt to use various things like your medical bay or other mission cards that you may attempt, and this is where some of the dice rolling is going to come into effect and the allocation side of things. You can see here an example at the bottom of what it looks like for an actual mission specialist who's doing it, the primary, the secondary mission, and what you have to do in order to actually complete it. So you can see a little bit just from that side of things. Then you can see some of the actual components in terms of the 4 different classes here. The engineering officer, the science officer, the medical, or the tactical, all I'm assuming which are asymmetric. It gives you a little nice turn order card here. And some of the allocation, you're trying to get 8 of these points, advanced points, I forget what they're called, but something along those lines in order to win the game. So if you're interested, check it out when it launches today. Now we're going with some of the bigger guns here. This is Edge of Darkness, the head-to-head tower dropping sort of worker placement card creating game from AEG. And it is returning with its latest expansion. I believe this is something like expansion number 4 for Edge of Darkness, and it's called Emissaries of the Vale. Now, we don't know as much as we did sometimes with some of the previous stuff. They've been pretty close to the vest in terms of this, but you're going to get more. This is, as they say, card crafting worker placement, in better words than I just tried to reiterate. And there's a little preview video as well. And again, the art is great, but is the gameplay going to match up? Edge of Darkness is a huge, massively overproduced worker placement card crafter. I mean, it is. If you're familiar with Mystic Vale was sort of the trial run that they say, or that the designer John DeClaire says, what ultimately they wanted Edge of Darkness to finally look like as the end product with this card crafting. And it seems to be pretty divisive. People either love it or hate it in terms of what it is. So I need to get mine played to find out whether or not this is going to be interesting, because I skipped the second Kickstarter where they offered 2 additional expansions like the Cliffs of Cold Harbor and the Guild Power Pack, I think is what it was. I have the base game with the Sands of Dunestar, and I need to figure out whether or not this is going to be intriguing to me, because it has sort of this different mechanism in terms of the dropping and the card crafting. And like I said, it's worker placement, so it's done in a completely different way. And I do tolerate worker placement in very select, minute doses. But whether or not this is it, especially with the price point that I'm sure that this is going to be, even before shipping, I need to be certain. So, yeah, this is launching the 17th. Check it out. Now, this is another outside of the box one that really doesn't have a lot of information elsewhere. But if you're familiar with the original card game, Doomtown, as sort of a living card game-esque style of things, This is the latest expansion, and now this is from Pinebox Entertainment. You may be more familiar with Doomtown when it was relaunched in 2014 and 2016 from previously mentioned AEG. This is the Weird West edition, and this is also launching on the 17th. And they say that there's going to be more solo, co-op, 2v1, everything else. Online support, more rule support, and 100% compatible with everything else that you've had previously. Like it says right here, it says Pinebox and Pinnacle took it over because this was sort of dead in the water until they picked it up. And so this is a new base set that they're saying, which is really interesting. They're trying to reconcile cards from the previous era that were problematic, and out of print expansions were making it really hard to add, more players in terms of, sort of like with Android. You just can't get some of the stuff, so it's hard to entice people to go in when you can't get half of the product in the first place. So this is really interesting. I have never played this one. I have never watched this one played. It's interesting. The theme is very intriguing, but I just don't have a clue. Now, they say, okay, you're going to get new rules, new ways to play, new organized play, a little bit of everything. So I mean, this should be really interesting to see what the support for something like this is. As you saw with Android getting picked up by essentially fans. Now, this is a little bit different, but what is the funding going to look like? What is the support going to be look like for this? How much is going to be offered besides this new base game edition? Are you going to be able to get some of the other? Are you going to be able to, get a ton of it? How much do you need? That was the big criticism recently of Arkham Horror LCG, right? That you needed 2 or 3 base sets to get a proper deck build, and they're putting out the new core that eliminates that essentially. Is this going to be doing the same thing? I'm going to be watching. I think a lot of people are, but how much it's going to cost, how much it's going to fund, that's going to be the big question when it launches on the 17th. Next up is a very, very interesting concept, and I'm going to be, again, even probably more intrigued to see what this one does, as sort of, I could see it just super flying high, or I could see it being a little bit too high of a concept for people at the same time. It reminds me, and I'll tell you why in a second, of Millennium Blades. This is Artefacts. You are entering the Artefactorum, where it is a combination of resource allocation and worker placement, where you are making the best artifact to go up head to head against other inventors' artifacts to win the game. Now, they say over on the website that it is going to be, and what's special about it, I like that. Why are you getting this game over something else? Excess. Huge components for the full gameplay experience, and that's a plus or minus, because they also say elsewhere that the base pledge, I believe, is going to be like something like $116. So it's not going to be sort of the under the radar, $40, $50, $60, $80, I think what it is now for Flamecraft, but modularity. But a lot of it going into this. You're claiming the master title. You want to damage your opponents. And that's the thing that we don't see a lot in the worker placement style of things. Is it going to be to take that? I think the concept is definitely high risk, high reward. And this is where I'm saying it's related to Millennium Blades. Because the prep phase, like Millennium Blades, you are building your deck. You are building your machine here. And that, I believe, is where some of the worker placement and the resource allocation comes in. But then you have the tournament, the confrontation phase, where you have to face off. And that is very much like Millennium Blades, where then you go into the tournament and you have to try and play your deck in the order, and you're going to have to deal with ramifications of how other people decide or not to decide to influence your own in the first place. Now, they have the rules here. It's a good 29 pages. And look at all these components. Look at this. This is massive amount of stuff. They weren't kidding when it comes to that. But is more better? That is the question here. Is it going to be too much? 29 pages of this. And this is dense stuff. This is not light stuff. And I'd be really intrigued to see what happens with this. The confrontation phase, the preparation phase. This is going to be just incredibly interesting to watch from a, what do we know about it? How much information is going to be out there? And what are people going to think of it? Especially if the price point's that high, and especially if the rulebook is this dense. Now, I'm not saying it's dense, like hard to learn, but if you've got a 29-page rulebook for a game I've never heard of before, that's a lot going on. And how eager are people going to be to, skim this one over and figure out how much it goes in line with what they like? So, honestly, I don't know. But I'm, again, really interested to see what happens, and I'm probably going to keep a close eye on this one just to see sort of which way it goes, just along with Doomtown. So this might not be the make it or break it that several of the other weeks have been in August already, but this has some really, really fascinating case studies of what will people support and fund and how it tests those between Flamecraft, between Masters of the Universe. These two this week, it's going to be interesting and intriguing. That's Artefacts. It's launching on the 17th. Next up, launching on the 18th. The aesthetic, again, is there. This is Wild Serengeti. Set collection, pattern building, puzzle solving, based on the, in case you can't guess it, Serengeti. You are getting your favorite little animal meeples, which are super cool. Now, thematically incorporated, though, I've read a little bit that some criticism is there. Like, okay, well, the predators aren't exactly going after the prey. They can be side to side, that sort of thing. But it's going to be an interesting concept, at least. I've seen it sort of making its slow rounds in the backgrounds of social media this week. You are performing actions to either place said animals on the board or manipulate them and move them around in order to create a scene that matches your essential quest or mission card. And when you do that, you get rewarded. Now, those also may give you other rewards that will continue on out throughout the game, but they also earn you victory points for the end game. This is probably one of the more aesthetically pleasing games that we have seen recently, just in the sheer elegance of the meeples, but also the simplicity of it not being too over the top. I worry about price point, though, when I see 3D setup terrains, sort of like the Everdell thing, where, all of a sudden the price is jacked up an extra $10, $15 for a game that really doesn't need it in the first place, and you're going for pure aesthetic value over the top wise. As you can see here, videos are already starting to trickle out. I know there's going to be a ton of content creator stuff on there because, like I said, I've seen it pop up on social media, so there will be plenty of this one for sure, without a doubt, when it launches. And I'm going to be, again, watching this one closely because this has sort of the aesthetic and the mechanisms that I like in terms of the manipulation on the board, the very tactical nature, as well as, if it's like that, maybe my kids will want to play it too from that side of things. So that is Wild Serengeti, launching on the 18th. Next up, also launching the 17th, the Game of Hunt. What you have here is 4, as it says on the picture right there, cooperative family-style magnetic games, all wrapped into one book. Trash Monster, Mushroom Forest, Another Planet, and Monkey Temple. Now, this is definitely a kid's game. There is a little bit of like pick up and deliver. You're moving around said maps, trying to pick up objects and put them where they need to go in each of these different scenarios. And, it's kid friendly, it's family friendly. What is the price point going to be, especially if it is magnetic, as you can see on these pieces of what they're going for. So, it's an interesting concept. How well do kids games do on crowdfunding right now? It's totally hit or miss, I feel like. Because especially there are so many good ones out there at retail in the first place, especially with things like Haba. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens when it's on the 17th and what sort of funding it gets. So check it out if you're interested and in the market for something like that. Super light week this week. Super light. I'm okay with that. Gives me more time to talk about other stuff. Yeah. Watching some cool stuff. Super dark. I'm watching The Fall right now. I'm finishing The Fall on Amazon Prime. Gillian Anderson, her first big role, I think, after the X-Files, sort of in a completely different direction, very serious, very dark. She plays an investigator over in the UK following this serial killer, and the dynamic between the two of them is really well done. It's really an interesting show. It's high quality. Not for everyone, though. Definitely not for everyone. I'm starting to get into The Expanse as well on Amazon Prime, so we'll see. And getting into the What If series on Disney Plus. The absolutely fantastically animated What If in the Marvel Universe based on the comics from many, many years ago. Now, if we could only get an Age of Apocalypse cartoon What If sort of thing from the MU X-Men, whole nother story. Anyway, did anyone catch the last Easter egg on one of the recent videos this week? I didn't see any comments about it, or too many comments about it, but it's out there. Go scanning. And I think beginning of next week, I think I'll do sometime the Board Games and Money Part 2. And I have another one under my belt too. The best biggest influence in board games of the last decade. What game is it? Well, I got a little segment, a little video saying what I think it was and why. Intrigued? Piqued? Interested? Check it out. Anyway, that's all I got. Have fun. I got 3 kids by myself with no power this weekend. It's going to be amazing. Okay. See you around. Stay classy.